Thank you so much, Sam. Hi. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about from going from frameworks to friendliness and how we believe you can build really, really welcoming open source in .NET. So I'm the one on the left. That's me, Emma Burstow, and I'm the VP of Developer Relations at Umbraco.
And I'm Lotte Pitcher, the one who's going to try and click slides when she's meant to. I'm also in DevRel at Umbraco, and we're both Microsoft DevTech MVPs.
I'm super happy about that too. So we're going to go through some of the things that we're going to talk about today, just so that you know what to expect from today's session. The first thing we're going to cover is the technology. We're going to look at the ways that your tech choices contribute to making a truly friendly open source project. I'm going to talk about stability and how it might sound a little bit dull, but it's a really key part of making your project very contributor friendly. Then we're going to go into communities and belonging, because we know that the people are really the things behind the tech that we want to look after. A little bit about empowerment and how we make life easiest for our contributors, and then into governance and how that really sets the groundwork for that community contribution. Sorry, Lotte, I'm seeing you're clicking slides and I'm just not noticing. So why are we here to talk about it today? So as we said, Sam, we're from Umbraco. Umbraco is a 20-year-old open source project. We just celebrated a birthday in February. And that's really, really cool in this industry. We started out with a single maintainer, as many, many open source projects do and continue to be. We're now 160 people here at the company. We're a .NET open source CMS platform, and our origin story is super cool. But the really cool part is why we call ourselves friendly, why it's all over our branding, and it actually didn't come from us. So it came from somebody all the way 19 years ago who said that everything about Umbraco is friendly. It's the UX, the community, and the pricing. And we loved that. And we really haven't been able to shake that tagline. It's baked into everything that we do. And we want to make sure that this is a super friendly place for contributors to enjoy themselves and to continue to innovate with us.
Yeah, so let's get started talking about the tech side of things. In case you don't know that much more about our project, Umbraco, it's just a bit of UI on top of ASP.NET MVC. This is a quote from our VP of Engineering. I think perhaps as a bit of a throwaway quote, because it's a little reductive for the flexible, extensible, wonderful platform that it is. But it is also kind of true. It's how we want .NET developers to feel when they're working with Umbraco, that it is just a bit on top. When you run .NET New Umbraco, you get a content management platform running on ASP.NET. You can add your own C# code, or you can install packages, which is our word for plugins, add-ons. You can use Umbraco to render your front-end website or work with it headlessly. And I say website, it's quite often not a website. It's been Umbraco's powered smart devices in hotels and big screens in music festivals. This is an example of a website being edited in the back office, which is the term we give to the restricted admin area that editors use to manage content. All the tools are there out the box to make the editing experience as friendly as you can for your users. And then if Umbraco is serving your front end, when a request for a URL comes in, such as blog/community, the default Umbraco controller finds that node in the content tree, creates a C# model with the node's properties, and passes that model to a Razor view to render the page. And that's the friendliest, shortest way I can think of to describe Umbraco to a .NET developer audience. So, unless there's a really good reason why you can't, always try to follow the standard .NET way of doing things, such as naming conventions, existing patterns like the MVC one I just showed, and dependency injection. When you install Umbraco, this is the program.cs that you get, and that will just look familiar to anyone who works with ASP.NET websites. You will feel at home when you see a code base that starts looking like this. So don't get in the way is something else we believe in. In Umbraco, You can do anything. You can do in a standard .NET web application, register your own routes, use custom database tables, inject your own dependencies. As I say, we give you out of the box the tools you need to build the editing experience, but from that point on, build sites in the way that you want to build them, because that's what we believe is key in building friendly software. Don't get in people's way. Also, don't ask people to learn legacy technologies. We at Umbraco have been guilty of this one for quite a few years with a long-standing dependency on AngularJS, which was a discontinued JavaScript framework, different to actual Angular, that no one had any interest in learning in the last few years. I'm delighted to say it's been removed a couple of versions now ago in Umbraco. It's all web components now. Use technologies that are actually useful for someone new to the world of web development to invest their time in to learn.
And that brings us really nicely onto the topic of stability, which is not like the funnest of words that we're going to discuss here, but stability is actually really, really crucial in creating a project that people want to contribute to. So we took this quote from the book Grit by Angela Duckworth, which is a fantastic read. And what she says is that consistency of effort over the long run is everything. And we're great believers in that. You're not going to get everything right immediately, but consistency is going to help you in the longer term. So we believe, and this is something that we really, really practice, that your release cadence is actually a contract. Creating that kind of certainty allows for people to plan. It really helps adoption. It completely removes friction, and it brings people along for the ride. So the .NET release cadence, this is how it looks. You'll be super familiar with this. It's their standard term support, or STS, and their long-term support, or LTS. So we've aligned our LTS to their LTS. So when we release a new version, we're actually leveraging the features of .NET as they are made available to developers. We actually have 2 major releases a year, though, so we're not completely in line. We have release one. We release next to .NET, and we usually go anywhere between a couple of days or 2 weeks after .NET release their major, and then we also have our STS versioning too.
Yeah, so our STS has actually come out twice a year, so we release majors twice a year. So yes, as Emma says, we're not completely doing it the way Microsoft does it. We follow Semver, so of course you can only introduce breaking changes in a major, and we want to be able to do that twice a year if we need to. We don't always, but we quite often do need to. It enables us to advance the software in the best way whilst minimizing technical debt. We encourage people to go from LTS to LTS, or if you use the STS versions, then continually upgrade those until you get to the next LTS.
And it really comes back to this whole thing, trying to balance innovation with stability, but it is possible to balance the two. I think as developers, sometimes we can get really lost in the race to innovate and forget that there should be a focus on stability too. But it is key in keeping your contributors engaged. In the early stages, absolutely. And then as you have more of a stable project, it becomes a little bit more difficult for people to find ways to contribute that are obvious to them. So there's much less low-hanging fruit. But if you want to keep your contributor ecosystem thriving, then you are going to need to find new avenues for them. So engaging them in changes really early. For our part, we get people involved in our RFC, or request for comments process, so that people actually have some input around architectural decisions before we have built the big features. So we really try to bring people along for the ride with us. And it also, on the plus side, just makes our software better when we do that. A really big win for us was in 2021, we released Umbraco 9, and that was our move to .NET Core, which was a huge disruption to our entire ecosystem because whole new framework. And we actually managed to engage community people from the get-go, 2 years before we even launched our version. They were involved in the RFC process, they were involved in the planning, they were involved in the writing. So when we went live with that launch, we actually had over 1,000 PRs from community contributors. and 121 contributors outside of our engineering teams. And I know that that was a long list because I read it out live on air when we did a launch, and it took me forever just to get through. Super proud of that.
So now we're going to talk about people a bit more, the communities that build up and around open source projects. Glyn Moody, who's been thinking and writing about open source for over 20 years, made this observation. While open source companies can be bought, open source communities cannot. Read the words. Which means if you've been successful enough to build up a large community, if they don't agree in the direction you're going in, they may not come with you. Another way I like to think of it is you can fork a repo, but you can't fork its community. But before we go much further, I do want to acknowledge that we at Umbraco are talking from now a position of privilege. We've built up a commercial enterprise around the free CMS. So we have 20 odd people who work full time on the open source code base. We're big enough to have a developer relations team that Emma and I are in. But this project started life with a single maintainer, as Emma said, Niels Hartvig, who decided all those years ago that he wanted to release the code with an MIT license, which we still use today, and see what happens. So whilst you might think that some of what we're talking about is only applicable to the bigger commercially backed projects like ours, we hope you'll find inspiration from this talk in whatever way you work with open source. So what do we mean by community? Well, we believe it's the people who go one step beyond just using the software because they were told to do so. There are many ways to do that. It includes people who engage online in forums, asking questions and answering the questions, talking on Discord, contributing to code, contributing to the documentation. Love those people. Commenting on discussions, as Emma said, RFCs, going to events, sharing packages themselves, releasing their own open source add-ons, recording YouTube videos. So we would say that anyone who is watching .NET Conf now or shared on Mastodon that they're excited about C#14, you are all part of the .NET community. So we'd like to set you a little challenge, which is if you haven't already, please find your local .NET user group. I'm a big fan of meetups being like the grassroots of joining communities, working out where the people are who you will enjoy spending time with and learning from. So if you go to the .NET Foundation's homepage on meetup.com, you will find an awful lot of .NET user groups all around the world. And why does community matter? Well, it isn't just finding free labor for writing code.
No.
As a community grows, you see the multiplier effect. When community members help inspire each other, it's really the only sustainable way that your community is going to grow, that your product is going to grow. And having a visibly active community builds confidence in your project and in its future.
So then we get on to a rather fluffy word, to be honest, and that's belonging. But this is super, super important because people are not going to contribute if they do not feel as though they belong. I chose this quote from somebody who is now a friend of mine. Her name's Yoka, and she's not actually a developer. She's been in the Umbraco community for a good 6 years now, and her contributions have been vast. And the reason that I chose to highlight her was because she said what we've heard variations of so many times. I came for the software, but I stayed for the people. Now, if you're able to welcome community members like Yoka, you will see the impact that it has. But in order for you to do that, you need to give people a sense of belonging. And the way that we start is actually by taking care of our newbies. I cannot stress this enough, but the first 15 minutes really, really matter. What does somebody encounter when they encounter your project, whether it's on GitHub or if it's at a meetup? What are the first 15 minutes like? Think about that time, because we do not stick around as developers or otherwise if the first 15 minutes actually kind of suck. Documentation is really, really important, whether that's your user manual or your contributing.md. Keep things up to date. Make sure that that first touch point is one of quality. Be really open with the mistakes that you make. We're fortunate enough to have made loads. We've been around for 20 years. But when I first started contributing to open source, I was terrified. I was really, really frightened of working in public and getting something catastrophically wrong. Everyone would point and laugh at me. And what really enabled me to feel free in contributing and to give my contributions was seeing people that I regarded as community legends really own their mistakes, really kind of show up and say, got this wrong. And not just say, I got this wrong, but then show us how they fixed it. That was super empowering for me. You're going to want to get really good at saying thank you. So obviously I'm a Microsoft MVP, so is my friend Lotte here, and we also have Umbraco MVPs, and these big awards are fantastic, but we mustn't underestimate the value of smaller thank yous. So if you're an open source maintainer and somebody's created a great contribution and you've merged it, feel free to reach out to them and let them know in a private message. Remember the value of shout outs on social media. They really, really land. And then I'm a sucker for a handwritten note. I cannot tell you the value of receiving a handwritten note, and it costs the price of a stamp and a little bit of time. It's actually the only thing that I've got framed on my desk is a handwritten note, not a picture of my kids.
Emma, you'd be surprised at the cost of a stamp in the UK now, but never mind.
Yeah, probably
Next
would.
slide, sorry.
And then I want you to think about the fact that representation really matters. And it matters at every single stage of the journey, whether we're talking about speakers, bloggers, or people that are submitting PRs. Try to highlight when interesting contributions come from an unexpected place. Really, really work to make space for different people, because it's that drives innovation. Creates a sense of safety across your entire community. And if we see people like us contributing, we are so much more likely to contribute. And you really wouldn't want to be without that vast range of contributions. We don't want the same 10 guys building our software.
So when you've got your community of people and they feel like they belong, it's then time to ensure that they feel empowered to achieve and contribute so that they keep doing it. Rizzle Scarlett of blackgirlbytes.dev wrote a wonderfully honest blog about her experience of contributing first to open source, not our project, I should add. And she said that gaining support from the maintainers and feeling embraced by the community empowered me. And I really relate to this quote. For over 10 years, I was a community contributor to Umbraco before making it my day job. I got an awful lot of support and encouragement to do things in our world. And whenever I heard that people had found use in what I'd created and shared, whether it was a blog post or a NuGet package, it was incredibly empowering. That was the word I always used to use. The contributions that I made were valuable, and that made me want to do more of them. The two factors of empowerment, well, you've got the resources that you need to share so that people can participate. So that's, as we've talked about a lot, documentation, a forum for people to communicate through, and Discord perhaps for that real-time chat and community building. And then you need the pathways for people to find the resources that you are having. And remember that you've got techs and non-techs. Yoka is a wonderful example in our community of a non-dev who's made a real difference to our ecosystem. So don't just think about the devs who are arriving, think about the other people as well. Oh, look, documentation again. Documentation should be empowering. So contribution guides that don't assume too much domain knowledge, or use video walkthroughs as well as the written word, because a lot of people prefer to watch a video to learn how to do something than to read about it. If you can create a tool to automate a job, then do that. Create tooling to do the heavy lifting. We have a .NET new template for creating customs extensions in the back office with this new, in quotes, way of doing it that end up as web components to help our community learn and focus on what they need to do. I had a lot of help from someone in creating a package for Umbraco and publishing it to NuGet, so I distilled all of that into a .NET template and released it to make it a lot easier for all the other people to learn what I'd learnt. I think it's called passing it forward. Probably one of my favourite phrases in the open source community. And remember that empowerment, as I think Emma said already, it leads to innovation. So at Umbraco, we've recently released a Umbraco MCP server, or a few months ago, who knows where the year's gone. This was an innovation started and developed by a couple of our most active community members who since have worked with us closely, but it came from them first originally. We have a weekly newsletter, FYI, it's called FYI, that aggregates content from all around the world in terms of different social media platforms and blog posts, and consolidates it all into one weekly newsletter that people can get in their mailboxes. Again, written by someone in their spare time because they knew it would be valuable and they had that itch that they really, really wanted to scratch, and they knew it was worth scratching.
And you can make a space where people want to scratch their itches and indeed do, if you provide good governance. And again, I get all the unfun words in this presentation, but let's talk a little bit about what governance looks like. So when we're talking about governance, we're talking about really having clear and transparent decision-making processes. Things like a code of conduct are also really, really helpful. Security vulnerability processes that people can see and people can read. And then things like the contribution license agreements. I've been bold enough to quote myself here because I couldn't find a fun enough quote around governance, but it's a good quote, so I'll go with it. Governance isn't the paperwork that you add when you're done. It shouldn't be added at the end. You begin at the beginning. It's the playground you build so that others can play.
I want to see this quote in other people's presentations now.
That would be fab. Let's get it out there. So I think it's best to start as you mean to go on. We don't do this because we were big. We did this when we were small and it had fantastic results. Create a culture really early. It is never too early to have your merge processes public, your contributor guidelines out there, or a code of conduct. These things are going to save you so much time in the long run, and you can adjust and adapt them as you go. Collaborate with your community on governance. Don't just create rules for your contributors without speaking to your contributors. In the early phases, that's about talking to the most active people on your repo. And then when you're 20 years down the line and you've got a much bigger community, the way that you can do it is something like our community teams initiative, where we have people that are working on specific projects who work with us here at HQ. We've got one on security and privacy, one on sustainability, and I could go on, but we do it because we know that we're not the experts on everything, and that it's great to create things for people with people. The outside expertise is invaluable to us. And one of the other things that we do too is we have a team of people who look at incoming pull requests on our core repository, and they're able to approve or ask for changes on all of those pull requests. And true story, they even have merge rights. So it's something that we've made work in the early phases and in the later phases, and it's been really, really valuable. Think about prioritizing clarity. You don't need a ton of rules, but just be really clear with what you want in place and what you have in place. Make public your decision-making processes around things like merge rights, who can merge, who can release, when these things are going to happen. We were thinking, we were talking when we were planning this about the trust paradox. And this is the idea that clear rules can actually increase trust. And if you increase trust, you actually increase contribution and engagement too. And then finally, explain your thinking. The core team says no is not very helpful to the people that are trying to raise issues or create pull requests or request features or build features. Don't become the benevolent dictator who isn't actually benevolent. Like, invisible decision making is really, really unappealing. So it's cool to say no. You should say no. At the end of the day, we govern. It's our project. But explaining your thinking really allows people to really understand what the processes are and actually to contribute elsewhere or to contribute in another way.
Yeah, so time to close. And we want to acknowledge that just like bug reports, which are a gift themselves if they're done
well.
When they're done well, we love a bug report. Mistakes are a gift too. Across the last 20 years, we've got plenty of things wrong. There's no doubt about it. We started small, we've got bigger, we've learned along the way. We definitely advocate progress over perfection. Software is built by people, so we want to take care of our people, and then the code will take care of itself.
Really, really work hard to keep your contributors close. Whatever phase of your project you're in, work hard to keep them close. Involve them in your decision making when you can, and this really will create a thriving ecosystem. We have some discussions on our RFCs that are so long they are intimidating, but so much valuable information in there. And then for our part, we believe that if you're ever really worried about the health of your contributor ecosystem, just return to the one real metric, which for us is, are people still excited to contribute after their first PR? And are they still excited to contribute after their 10th?
Which leaves us to say thank you and apologies, we forgot to do the bit where we say where you can find us and find out more. But Emma and I both on LinkedIn with our names.
You know our names now, so you should be able
Yeah.
to find us.